we have a pretty daunting task today. We have to get through the rest of Joseph's story. And so we're going to tell some story. We're going to tell the story of what God is doing through Joseph. And so if you haven't gotten enough sleep, stand up. You know, every pastor thinks that they are really engaging and so exciting, but the reality is you all keep me humble because some of you fall asleep every Sunday. Thank you for the humility. But let's try to stay awake. Let's just lean in here and talk about Joseph. Real quick summary. Joseph, the 11th son, was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was the favorite of the dad, least favorite of the brothers. Slavery. He became the highest in his master's home, lied about, thrown into prison, became the highest in the prison, forgotten about. Finally, through Pharaoh's dreams in Egypt, interpretation, and through God's wisdom through Joseph, Pharaoh made him the second most important person in the world because Egypt was the most powerful nation, country, kingdom in that time. That's a pretty good summary, wasn't it? And the idea was that God's hand was working through Joseph. And Joseph, he had a plan. God had a plan through him to prepare the land for the 7 years of incredible, abundant harvest, to prepare for the 7 following years of famine and devastation. And so Pharaoh said, you got a plan, you enact it, you put it into place. And through that plan, Egypt becomes very, very wealthy. And they're able to sell the grain in the 7 years of famine to all the neighboring countries and places and get more and more wealth. In fact, history tells us that Egypt gained a lot of land during this time because other people were selling their land to Pharaoh to gain grain to stay alive. Egypt became very powerful, even more powerful in this time through the plan that God used through Joseph. Chapter 42, the plot thickens. When Jacob, Joseph's father, back in Canaan, learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at each other?" "Listen," he went on, "I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we will live and not die." It had gotten so bad it had even spread into Canaan. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he thought something might happen to him. Remember, Benjamin and Joseph are full-blooded brothers, the same mother. The rest of them are half-brothers. They're all the same son of Jacob. Joseph was the favorite of dad, least favorite of brothers. And I told you all, Jacob had an unhealthy relationship with mom. Then it moved to his one favorite wife. When she died, it moved to his now favorite son. When he is assumed dead, it moved to the son Benjamin. He has forgotten all others and is connected and attached to this one brother or son in an unhealthy way, I would tell you. Benjamin is not some young kid at this point in the story. It's been 13 years at least since Joseph left. And he was 17 when he left. Benjamin's probably around the age of 14 when he left, plus 13. He's almost 30 at least. We picture this little kid that Jacob's protecting. No, it's an adult. We find later he actually has kids at this point. Because Jacob's the patriarch, what he says goes. And it's a little bit unhealthy in terms of how much he's attached to this one son, to the extent of all the others are forgotten. So they go. They go to Egypt, and they go to buy some grain. And they get there before the leader of the country, who just happens to be their brother, Joseph, who they sold, and they don't recognize him, and they bow down their faces to the ground. Verse 7 of 42. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he treated them like strangers and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan to buy food," they replied. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered his dreams about them and said to them, You are spies. You have come to see the weakness of the land. No, my Lord, your servants have come to buy food, they said. We are all sons of one man. We are honest. Your servants are not spies. Okay, we could spend a whole sermon unpacking that one paragraph. We can't. So hopefully you've been here the last 3 weeks so you can keep up. If not, I'm sorry. We're going to try to keep you up to date. Okay, so why is Joseph speaking so harshly to his brothers? I don't know. There's a lot of theory on this. Is it because he's testing them? Probably. Is he, for the first time since having left home, has he been faced with this reality of being left and abandoned and sold? Maybe. He's been living in his own reality for 17 years, trying to survive and get by. He's thriving, certainly, but he's still trying to survive in the midst of a new language, a new culture, a new land. And for the first time in 17 years at least, he sees his brothers. It's okay. It's okay. He sees his brothers and recognizes just what has happened to him. We are not spies. And they use an interesting word there. They say, we are honest. Joseph would say, no, you're not. You sold me. You threw me in a pit. I heard you arguing over the price that you would sell me for. I heard you talking about maybe even killing me. You're not honest. Is he angry? I don't know. Now, looking at the character of Joseph so far, I wonder if maybe it's simply he just wants to know if they've changed or not. How far have they come? Are they still the same brothers who sold me? And he has to wonder on some level, I don't see my youngest brother, my only full-blooded brother, have they done to him what they also did to me? Verse 12. No, he said, you have come to see the weakness of the land. You're a spy. You're totally a spy. They replied, we, your servants, were 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no longer living. Joseph's got to be thinking, oh, yes, he is. He's right here in front of you. And the wounds, I have to believe he's human, right? Wounds may have been reopened. Wounds he didn't even know still existed. And he says, I've spoken. I'm going to test you. You're going to send one guy back home and leave the 9 here with me. And they're going to bring back this youngest brother you say lives. And when I see him, I know you're not spies. And then you can all go back together. This makes no sense, right? I mean, if you're the brother, you're thinking, how is bringing him back going to prove anything? But they say, and so he throws him in prison for 3 days, and they just sit on that knowledge, right? They're just sitting there, and Joseph's kind of like, you're going to sit there for 3 days in prison. And he comes back and says, here, I thought about some more. Here's the plan. 1 of you will stay, and 9 of you will go back and bring back this youngest brother of yours, and then I'll release them to you. In the meantime, you can have some grain to help keep your family fed. But then bring him back, and then your other brother will go back with you. Verse 21. Listen to this response. Then they, the brothers, said to each other, obviously we are being punished for what we did to our brother. We saw his deep distress when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this trouble has come to us. But Reuben replied, didn't I tell you that not to harm the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now you must account for his blood. Remember, Reuben was the one brother who said, let's not kill him, let's throw him in a pit. And his plan was to come back and free him later. But he was gone, and they sold him in the meantime. Reuben is the only brother who has some semblance of guiltlessness. He kept quiet all these years, so not entirely. But he at least has some high road. Verse 23, that they did not realize that Joseph understood them, since there was an interpreter between them. He turned away from them, and he wept. And he turned back and spoke to them. He took Simeon from them and had him bound before their eyes. He gives orders to his men. hey, pack all their sacks with some grain and put the money they paid for it back on top of their bags. And they won't even know it's there, right? What is Joseph doing? I don't know, mind games? He's testing. We don't really know exactly why, but he's playing. He wants to get his brother back. He wants to see what's happened. And he wants, I would tell you, see who his brothers are today. Who are they now? And he's hearing them talk about himself. And they have no idea he can understand them. And so they leave. And they get one day down the road. And they stay for the night. And they open up the bags and see the money. And my money's been returned. What's going on? We are such trouble. Their hearts sank. This is verse 28. Trembling, they turned to one another and they said, what is this that God has done to us? See, they feel totally guilty. They've been harboring guilt for at least 13 years. What they've done to their brother. They have never forgotten. And they're finally thinking, we're finally getting our comeuppance. We're finally getting what we deserve. They go back home. They tell Dad, hey, Dad, we saw this guy, and he was pretty mean. And he knew about our youngest brother. We told him about Benjamin, and he wants to see him. He accuses us of being spies. And how are we going to do this? We have the money still. We paid him. Our promise, we paid him. But he's so mean. He kept Simeon with him, and he wants to see Benjamin. In verse 36, their father Jacob said to them, you have deprived me of my sons. Joseph is gone, and Simeon is gone. Now you want to take Benjamin? Everything happens to me. I told you all weeks ago that Jacob never really recovers from the loss of Joseph. I can't begin to understand. I don't want to understand, if I'm being honest with you, what it's like to lose a child. Don't know. But I would tell you to forget all other children because of it is not healthy. That I do know. Jacob is just in such grief even after 13 years. Everything happens to me. Then Reuben, the one whose conscience is the most clear, says to his father, you can kill my 2 sons if I don't bring him back to you. Put him in my care and I will return him to you. But Jacob answered, my son will not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If anything happens to him on your journey, you will bring my gray hairs down to Sheol, or death in sorrow. And they leave Simeon in Egypt. Forget about him. They eat the grain. 43, verse 1. Now the famine in the land was severe when they had used up the grain, which is going to happen eventually. Maybe they thought, well, maybe it'll last through the famine, even though Egypt knows it's 7 years long. Their father said to them, go back and buy us some food. But Judah, and who's Judah? He's the brother, he's the son who had the great idea of selling Joseph in the first place. He is, in some ways, the most guilty. It's his idea. They're all guilty. But it's his brainchild of selling Joseph into slavery. But Judah said to him, the man specifically warned us, you will not see me again unless your brother is with us. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go. For the man said to us, you will not see me again unless your brother is with you. And Jacob's response is, how does he even know you have a brother? Why would you tell him that? And Judah says, how was I supposed to know it would cause a problem? He asked about his dad. Is your dad still living? We told him, what about your brothers? Are there more of you guys? He just kept asking, and we just said, yeah, we had 2 others. One is dead, and one is still alive with dad. And suddenly it's like, bring him and bring him to me. How are we supposed to know this? It's crazy. Verse 8, then Judah said to his father Israel, send the boy with me. Okay, Reuben already tried this, right? Judah now tries it. Send the boy with me. We will be on our way so that we may live and not die, neither we nor you nor our children. I will be responsible for him. Interesting, isn't it? Judah. I will be responsible for him. You can hold me personally accountable. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I will be guilty before you forever. He already is, isn't he? The only thing is, Jacob doesn't know it. So here, for the first time, if this becomes reality, for the first time, we'll get to the moment, Jacob will realize Judah's at fault. But for Benjamin, not for Joseph. And so they send him, fine, just take him. Just take him and go. Take twice the amount of money. Pay back what you brought back with you. And then pay for the new stuff. Just take him. In verse 14, listen to Jacob's words. May God Almighty cause the man to be merciful to you, so that he will release your other brother and Benjamin to you. As for me, if I am deprived of my sons, then I am deprived. What's that word there? Hopelessness. Just take them. Just take them. Whatever. I'm done. If he comes back, great. If not, oh well. Brokenness. Remember that word, brokenness? We said it a bunch of times in the last 4 weeks. So they go back. They bring the money. They get before this man who is the right hand of Pharaoh, and he sees them, and he sees Benjamin, and he tells his stewards, take them to my place to have dinner with me. And the brothers think, oh, we're in so much trouble. We are in so much trouble. And they say, listen, guys, they tell the stewards, we had money left over that we didn't know where it came from, and we're bringing it back to you. We're going to pay you double now. We didn't steal anything. We're not really spies. And then the steward says, we got paid. Don't worry about it. It must have been God that gave you your money back. Just mind games, head trips, right? Verse 27. We're going fast. Keep up. He asked if they were well, and he said, how is your elderly father that you told me about? Is he still alive? Joseph came back to have dinner with them. And they answered, your servant, our father is well. He is still alive. And they bowed down to honor him. When he looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he asked, is this your youngest brother that you told me about? And he's speaking in Egyptian, right? Interpreter is speaking for him. So it's not like direct. Then he said, may God be gracious to you, my son. Listen to this. Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with emotion for his brother. He was about to weep. He went into an inner room to weep. And he washed his face and came out, regaining his composure. He said, serve the meal. I mean, the brothers got to think, why did he just run out like that? That's weird. He sees his brother, and I just got to tell you, he knows he's still alive. All this time, he probably thought, they've sold my brother too. They've killed him too. They've done something to him. And now there's proof his brother is still alive. Something maybe has changed inside the other ones. There's hope for them yet. And he serves them with food, and Benjamin gets 5 times the portion of everyone else. I love that part. 44. And Joseph commanded his steward, fill the men's bags with as much food as they can carry, and put each one's money at the top of his bag. Oh, man. He's kind of evil, isn't he? Put my cup, the silver one, at the top of the youngest one's bag, along with his grain money. So he did as Joseph told him. The stewards don't seem to know either who these guys are. Joseph's the only one who knows the plan here. The only one that has any idea of who's who. And I think, why does he pick all these guys for? They're nobodies from Canaan. They're just like 10 of them. They did as Joseph told him. And as they leave, they get a couple hours away, essentially, and Joseph says, go back and get them. They've taken my cup, my silver cup that I use for divination. And they go and they stop and say, hey, our master's cup is gone. One of you took it. And because we tend to be rash with our promises and our own words, they say in verse 9, if any of us is found to have it, he must die, and we also will become my Lord's slaves. That was stupid. The steward replied, what you have said is right, but only the one who is found to have it will be my slave, and the rest of you will be blameless. So each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. The steward searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and each one loaded his donkey and returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers reached Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell to the ground before him. "What is this you have done?" Joseph said to him, "Didn't you know that a man like me could uncover the truth by divination?" Okay, just a real quick thought. If the cup he used for divination has been taken, how did he divine that it was taken by that guy? You see what I'm saying here? Divination is the idea of using tea leaves or using some kind of weird magic to determine what's happened in the world, what's happening around you, right? It's mystical. And he says, "Didn't you know I could figure out the divination? But he stole your cup. How did you do it?" The brothers don't seem to question this at all. They're just like, "Oh, we're in trouble. What are we going to do?" Verse 16, "What can we say to my Lord?" Judah replied. "How can we plead? How can we justify ourselves? God has exposed your servant's iniquity. We are now my Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup was found." Just stop for a moment. Put yourself in Joseph's shoes, sandals. Listen to what he's hearing Judah say. The same brothers who sold him, they're saying, "We're guilty, fine, but we're all guilty. Take us all." And Joseph said, "I swear that I will not do that. The man in whose possession the cup was found will be my slave. The rest of you can go in peace to your father." I think he's testing them. And Judah begins to plead. He approaches Joseph and he says, "You asked about our brother, and we told you we had one. And we told you he didn't come. And you said you bring him to see me. And we told our dad, and our dad is going to die if we don't bring him back. He didn't want us to begin with. You can't do this to us, Joseph, please. It's too much going on." Verse 32. Joseph's kind of conclusion to his pleading here. "Your servant became accountable to my father." Your servant being Judah became accountable to my father for the boy, saying, "If I do not return him to you, I will always bear the guilt for sinning against you, my father. Now please, let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy. Let him go back with your brothers, for how can I go back to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the grief that would overwhelm my father." Judah has changed. I'm not going back there to see his brokenness again. I'm not going back there to see pain. And he'll know this time it's my fault. I'm not doing it. I would rather be in slavery than go back without Benjamin. I took the blame. I'm taking the blame. Take me instead. And Joseph responds in a way most of us probably would never have responded. Chapter 45. Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of all the attendants. And he asked everyone to leave. Everyone just go, except for the brothers. And they are afraid. What are they going to do? And he says, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" For the first time since being taken to Egypt, he speaks in his own language. And before this point, he's asked, "Is your father still living? Is your father?" And for the first time, he can say, "Is my father still living?" Verse 4, and Joseph said, "Please come near me. I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt. And now don't be worried or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt." Did you hear what he didn't say? How dare you send me into slavery? Look where I'm at and look where you're at. Doesn't say it. Go home and get dad. Bring all the family back here because here we have food, here we have sanctuary, here we have life. I'll take care of you. Bring everyone back here and we'll be a family again. Verse 14, and Joseph threw his arms around Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin wept on his shoulder. Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept. And afterward, his brothers talked with him. They just sat around and they talked. What a beautiful image of fellowship. They just sat and they talked. They caught up. How many kids do you have now? Who's your wife? How's life going? What you don't hear there is condemnation, blaming. Brokenness, I told you, breeds brokenness, which breeds brokenness unless something changes the cycle. Verse 25, they went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They said, Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. What a thing to tell your father about your dead brother. Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe it. But when they told Jacob all that Joseph had been through and had said to them, he saw the wagon that Joseph had sent to transport him. The spirit of their father Jacob became revived. And Israel said, enough. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go to see him before I die. Imagine if Joseph had said to his brothers the negative stuff. Look what you've done. You're dirt. You disgust me. I hate you. You sold me, and I'm just a thing to you. How dare you do this to me? Go home and tell dad what you've done. And bring him back here because I'll take better care of him than you will. And so the story's different now, right? The brothers come home with their heads hung really low. Dad, listen, Joseph's still alive. He's a pretty powerful guy in Egypt. And he's there because we sold him and we told you that he found his coat and he was dead. Dad, I'm sorry, but we lied to you for the last 13 years. And Jacob then would respond with, how could you? How could you lie? How could you do this to your own brother? You saw what I've been through. You see what's happening here, right? Brokenness, breeding brokenness, breeding brokenness. What happens? Joseph changes the cycle because God changed and taught Joseph. In your life of brokenness, in my life of brokenness, we can reproduce and recreate that brokenness, or we can say, God, help me break the cycle. What's sad is, if you know the story after, this story closes in the life of Jacob and Joseph and all their brothers, right? But as the next cycle begins, they begin recreating that all over again of brokenness. But here, in a moment, we have this cycle being broken and restoration taking place. Because Joseph said, you aren't guilty of this. God had a better plan in mind than you could begin to imagine. And because I'm where I'm at, where God has put me, I can now save you and our family. Joseph saw what no one else was able to see. And he offered his brothers love and forgiveness rather than condemnation and blame. They were reconciled. They sat and they talked. We close in a song. I want to ask a couple questions. Reconciliation is being brought back into right relationship with someone. Okay? And here on this earth and this horizontal plane, okay, Joseph and his brothers were broken. They were torn apart in terms of relationship. Well before they sold them into slavery. And here they're reconciled. They're brought back together. Is there someone in your life that you need be reconciled to? Chances are most of us have someone that we can name where brokenness has just bred in that relationship in some way. Maybe it's mom, maybe it's dad, maybe it's a kid, maybe it's a family member, it's a friend. I have no idea who it is, but I'm guessing that you know exactly who it is. You need to do one of two things. You need to go and ask for forgiveness. Not saying, hey, listen, I'm sorry, but worst apology ever. I'm sorry. I'm to blame. I added to this when I should have not been adding to it. I've caused more problems than I've solved. Would you forgive me? Some of you have been mistreated by someone else. You need to forgive them, even if they don't ask for it. And approach them and say not, hey, I forgive you. That causes more problems sometimes, by the way. And simply saying, listen, I love you. And whatever's happened in the past, I want to forget about it. I want to move forward. I want to be clean slated with you and move forward in the right relationship. I want to be reconciled back to you. All this stuff down here about who did what to whom is just junk and garbage and not important. What I want is to be back in your life and back to right relationship with you. That's what I want. And this stuff just gets in the way. Let's get it out of the way and go back to the top. The other thing I want to encourage you is many of us here maybe aren't reconciled to God. Our sin, our misdeeds, our mistakes, it pushes God away. And Joseph's story is one of the most parallel stories we have so far of what would later become Jesus. Joseph offers reconciliation and grace in a way that only Jesus does later on. Now, Jesus goes a bunch of steps more, absolutely. Joseph is very limited when Jesus is unlimited, right? But we can see here a measure, a reflection of Jesus Christ in Joseph, where instead of taking brokenness and breaking more, he restores his family. And healing is made in Jacob. Their father is able to have all of his brothers in one house again. And he is revived. Christ wants to be reconciled to you more than you can begin to imagine. All you have to do is come and ask him to forgive you, and it is done. You aren't to blame. He'll say, I'll take it. I'll pay your price. I'll be blamed for you. You are clean. You are forgiven. You are perfect. Romans 8. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. The law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and of death. For the law could not do, weak as it was to the flesh, God did, sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh. As an offering for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh so that the requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. And Christ is telling you right now is stop walking in the flesh and start walking in the Spirit. These altars are always open. During this song, if you want to come and pray, come and pray. Whether it's, God, help me have enough courage to go to that person that's hurt me and just love them. God, help me go to that person that I've hurt and help me ask for forgiveness. God, help me come to you and be reconciled back to you. Restoration, reconciliation is but one step away.